Hey, well, good day. Perry Waters here, Vice President Operations for Nova Space, and I've got Jeff Womelsdorf, our Vice President of Course Design. We're going to sit here and talk about a topic of kind of how we found ourselves in the space industry. And Jeff and I are kind of similar in a lot of aspects that we didn't really grow up with a technical background or our education. And basically, he's going to kind of give you his story and his journey, how he got in the space industry and kind of what he's been doing. So without any further delay, Jeff, can you go ahead and just kind of give us your background and kind of how you find yourself and where you are at this point?
Thanks, Perry. I'm Jeff Womelsdorf, Vice President of Product Development. Like Perry said, I do not have a technical background. So I went to school and got my degree in history, which is not very relevant to the space industry, but nonetheless, it led to a path that eventually I found myself in the space industry. Coming up in the Marine Corps, I had a communications background, which has a little bit of space involved with it as far as satellite communications goes. But again, you're worried about it from a communications perspective, not necessarily a space perspective. I was lucky enough to my last active duty assignment. I was the Marine Corps liaison for the National Security Space Institute, where I did everything from instruct in Space 200 and 300 to do course design for some different things. I was the assistant dean for one of the colleges there. So I was able to really get a good background in not only space, but also in education. So very familiar with DoD education and kind of how it's structured. And then, I was able to bring that experience to Nova Space, where and we'll talk about it later, but there's definitely some things that could be improved upon in DoD education. So that's kind of how I got involved with space. Tons of different courses. I won't list them off here, but essentially it took me the better part of 5 years to get to where I'm at, to intelligently speak to a huge range of topics that are within the space industry.
Perfect. And on that range of topics, I know you've been working on some big projects, with some big space companies. And I remember one of them, if I remember correctly, you were talking with like 8 different subject matter experts, and you found out quickly that they didn't know the other's job. And you found yourself pretty quickly one that was being the glue, that was kind of the connective tissue that was able to link all of what they kind of wanted to do together because of your understanding of all those different areas. Can you kind of go over that a little bit and how you kind of found yourself and how you talked as a technical expert at that point to these other technical experts?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great overview of what I was doing. So we were approached by a company that wants to cover a wide range of topics, and they set up calls for me to talk with their different subject matter areas in these stovepipes. And while I was meeting with all these folks, I slowly began to realize they're very familiar with their area of expertise, but they don't necessarily have a good grasp of how it ties to all the different mission areas or subject areas that you find in the industry. So to make an effective education tool with what we're doing, building a course for them. My job is really, and what my background allowed me to do, was make all those different linkages between these different subject areas and make their subject matter experts also aware of kind of how they tie into all their different topics. It was a kind of a great exercise in proving that the years that I spent going through all these different courses and talking to folks and learning about this subject matter, it paid off, and more so that it pays off to be a generalist. I don't need to be some stovepipe expert that can talk about some little widget associated with a particular satellite. I can be valuable to a team by being able to communicate all these different linkages and topics as I'm talking with customers.
Okay. Yeah. Outstanding. Yeah. I appreciate that perspective. So when you've kind of been on this space journey, and when did you realize just how dependent we were on space capabilities in our everyday lives and jobs? And when did that kind of, hit you? And then kind of how, from that perspective, how valuable do you believe it is to have this knowledge of space?
So I'll answer the last question first. So it's extremely valuable. I mean, that last example that I was talking about, there's not many of us like you and I, Perry, that can talk to this extremely wide breadth of topics. And I think the value that we add to the industry is that we push the industry. So we accelerate the pace of innovation because we can communicate how something might affect something else. And that that allows the more technical folks to run with what they're doing as far as building these components or launching these components or what have you. But yeah, I think being a generalist is an extremely underrated capability in the industry, and one that will certainly grow as the industry continues to grow. Really the point for me where it clicked. So all the different courses that I've been through with the DoD, they all emphasize space touches everything, and they reemphasize it. But you don't really internalize it until you have to put something together that really demonstrates that. And for me, that was an Army course that I went through, where we essentially, from a military perspective, obviously we had to brief an operation from start to finish, and where space integrated into each one of those different areas, and who you would talk to get this effect, and just a whole wide range of different capabilities. And after putting that together and then briefing the instructor cadre, that was really my moment where I realized what value I could bring to a team as a generalist in the industry.
Yeah, perfect. I appreciate that. Yeah. So, hey, it sounds like you got over some of the big hurdles in kind of the challenges with getting in space with your background, I think your history degree and things like that. But what were some of the other challenges you faced on your, space education journey?
Yeah, so I mentioned it in my intro, but having that perspective of what DoD education is, and being a part of that process for students, it's tough. And doing these in-residence courses as an instructor, you're finding yourself teaching to kind of the middle ground of the crowd. So there's folks in the room that are eating up everything that you say, but the top third and bottom third of that crowd are either zoning out if they already know the stuff, or they're just struggling to keep up if they're in the bottom third there. So you really have to kind of teach to the average, and that's not a very effective way to instruct. And you can throw as many war stories in or examples as you want into a lecture that's supported by PowerPoint. But at the end of the day, about 15, 20 minutes in, folks' eyes are rolling over, and they're starting to fall asleep at their desks and that kind of stuff. So it's very challenging to keep people engaged with the material. And I mean, I used to do a lot of in-class exercises where folks were working through problems, and that helped. But again, just kind of the overarching structure of a lot of DoD education methods is PowerPoint and lecture, and it's tough. So yeah, what I was really excited about coming on the NovaSpace team was exploring alternate ways to teach this stuff in an engaging way. And I think that we have absolutely knocked it out of the park with the courseware that we've developed for our program, by presenting folks with problems that they're actually simulating problems that they might be facing out in industry. And that's just such an effective way to learn. You're exploring to learn. The way that we have it structured, our course is asynchronous. So if you find yourself in an area that you're already very familiar with, boom, just get right through it. You don't have to spend too much time analyzing the material. But then when you find yourself either struggling or engaging with the material a little more, you can dive as deep as you want into that, so that you can learn it. You can walk away with the course with something valuable. So yeah, that's really my perspective on kind of the challenges. Another challenge, I guess, from a student perspective, being a history major, was kind of conceptualizing these mathematical problems that are associated specifically with orbital mechanics. And it was really intimidating at first for me, because I am not a math guy by any means. But yeah, just knowing the concepts behind a lot of these equations is enough. That's all you need to be successful on a team. You don't need to be able to crunch these complex numbers and all that not so fun stuff. So that was a challenge for me. But yeah, I quickly realized that this stuff it's rocket science, but you can understand it.
Sure. Okay, great. Yeah. And that kind of leads me into my next question I wanted to talk to you about. Because you kind of talked about the novice and getting into it with the course. Could you kind of explain how that novice, that beginner, would kind of benefit from taking this course, and kind of talk about the learner constellation, how they could basically manipulate that to where they're going to get the full everything on the course, and that asynchronous thing you're talking about. And could you kind of how that could really benefit when that starter in the space industry or wants to learn knowledge and ultimately have a career? Can you kind of walk us through how that Nova Space course would benefit somebody like that?
Yeah, so the fact that our course is asynchronous, or all of our courses are asynchronous, but our space professional course specifically, it can be daunting. I mean, it's it's 25 to 30 hours worth of content. So you might not know where to jump in if you're brand new to the industry. But we built a tool called the Learner Constellation that essentially serves as a self-assessment up front. So you go in and you rate yourself on how your competencies are across a bunch of different subjects. And then based on that, you can further refine kind of the areas that you want to focus on initially, so that when you're jumping into the course, you're jumping into something that you're super interested in up front, and not just having to arbitrarily click through some material so that you can unlock the next module. We don't do that at all. So at the end of the Constellation, you're presented with a roadmap to get you started in the course. And then from there, you just dive right into the material.
Okay, great. So, with your background and kind of what you've done, and who do you think would benefit from taking our program? You can go across the gamut, or, kind of who's it geared towards, and kind of give us your perspective on that.
We mentioned it already, but folks that are trying to get entry into the industry. So, it could be anybody that's looking to do it. But specifically, I'll kind of call out like a recent grad with an engineering degree. You know how to crunch the numbers, but you don't necessarily know what all is out in front of you when you're entering into the industry. So taking this course will give you that solid foundation that you need to more effectively pursue your interests, essentially. So let's say you take the course and you find yourself gravitating towards the launch sector. You can spend a lot of time in there, get your feet wet, get the kind of key knowledge that you need, and then pursue your interests. So go apply for jobs that'll get you in there, instead of just arbitrarily going on with a big company to do some random engineering job. You can actually kind of narrow down what you're looking at to benefit yourself. Along those lines, so space, everything that happens here on Earth, as the space industry continues to grow, we're going to need those professionals in the space industry to support as well. So everything from lawyers, accountants, HR folks, project managers. So you know how to manage a project, but that's going to be difficult to manage a project if you don't have a basic understanding of what your project teams are doing. So that it's extremely valuable for project managers. It's kind of a reach, but welders in space, seamstresses in space, it might not be happening now, but I definitely think within the very near future, those are conversations that we'll definitely be having. So this course really applies to essentially everybody in the industry right now, or anybody that's looking to get into the industry.
That's great. So basically what I'm kind of hearing is there's a little something for everyone.
Yes.
In this industry. Awesome. Perfect.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. Okay, great. Yeah, Jeff, well, I really appreciate you joining us today, and please tune in to the next session. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Perry. It was great talking with you.
Take care.